How does Chabad explain the Holocaust?
I'm not going to answer. I'm just going to tell you a couple of things that I heard. And obviously, I'm going to tell you things that come directly or indirectly from the Rebbe, because that's all Chabad is. There's no Chabad other than Rebbe. Anything Chabad other than Rebbe is not Chabad. Number one, all of us know that the word of the Friedrich Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, said right after the Holocaust. He was visited one of the Gedolei Yisrael. I heard that it was the Satmerov, Rabbi Yoeli Satmerov, but I don't know. It may have been the Kleisenberger. And he told the Rebbe that you didn't need Yeshuas and Achomis. There's a Lashon that he said you didn't need a lot of help. And the Friedrich Rebbe said to him, Eine aber a rechte, one but a proper one. And he was trying to be matzdik esadin. This Guterid was trying to give justice that the Holocaust happened because of this, that, and the other. You know that it's brought in Sforim. That one of the worst things a person could do is talk in shul. It says in Sforim, red in the shul, what's the big deal? To talk in shul, looking at Yeres HaKedesh, Chav Daled, you see what it means to talk in davening. But he tried to give some kind of a justification for it. And the Friedrich Rebbe told him, "Men darf nicht machen dem Eibishten zu viel gerecht." It's not our job to justify God, to make Hashem correct. In other words, you're allowed to have a taina. And we know that over the years, the Rebbe made it very clear that we can't understand such a thing, we don't understand such a thing, we don't want to understand such a thing, we don't want to accept such a thing, and so on. And it's just beyond our comprehension. But of course, we know how the Rebbe used to talk to people. I once heard Rabbi Shlomo Kunyas or Gesund sein from California describe a yechidus. What happened was there were a group of students who had come to the Rebbe to interview the Rebbe, to talk to the Rebbe. And of course, as was the custom in those days, you had to wait your turn, so you could wait hours. So there were Bachrim who had to keep them entertained. They were not frum boys and girls. They were not accustomed to the etiquette of 2 o'clock in the morning waiting for an appointment. So there were Bachrim who had to keep them busy. And the schar was, the schus that they had was that when they went into the Rebbe, those Bachrim were allowed to go in. And there was a lengthy yechidus. The Rebbe answered many questions. I think the yechidus is published. And of course, one of the questions was 1961. One of the questions that came up was the Shoya, was the Holocaust. And the Rebbe said, I don't have any explanation for the Holocaust. But I'll tell you this, the Rebbe said, that anybody who doesn't fight against assimilation, who doesn't stand to preserve Yiddishkeit and to reverse this terrible trend of losing Jews by the millions, is guilty of Hitlerism. That was the expression. I heard this story from Rabbi Kunin almost 40 years ago. But I remember that is guilty of Hitlerism. And we know that the Rebbe and the Friedrich Rebbe used to talk about the American Holocaust. The American Holocaust you can't blame on anybody, because it's the Holocaust of apathy. It's the Holocaust of being asleep. It's the Holocaust of assimilation that happens so gradually and so slowly and so imperceptibly, you don't even feel the pain of being assimilated. And we're losing millions of Jews. And the Rabbeim used to call it the American Holocaust. And you want to fight against that Holocaust. You know, the Jewish people are worth preserving. The Jewish nation is the eternal nation. They're going to be here with or without us, because the Eibishter wants us to be here, but we have an obligation. And there is a Holocaust it's happening every minute of every day. It's a Holocaust, like I said, that you can't blame on anybody, but it's a real Holocaust, and it has to be opposed, has to be fought, has to be reversed by Jewish awareness and Jewish involvement and Jewish pride and Jewish practice and Jewish life and so on. And I'm going to say one more thing, and I'm not going to say the name of the rabbi that was involved with this, because I would like to ask him again. I met him several times. I asked him to repeat to me the details, and I don't remember them precisely, so I'm going to say it Shalei b'Shem Eimrei, and I hope he'll be meichel me, because in case I'm making a mistake, I don't want to blame him. Quoted here says, there was a Chabad rabbi who traveled, and he visited Australia. Now, the mainstream Jewish community in Australia are Holocaust survivors. You go to a place like South Africa, for example, the mainstream of that community came there before the war. It's a different world. It's a different culture. Australian Jews, by and large, are the descendants of survivors. And the Holocaust is very real for them, even now. And the cliche, the question is, where was God during the Holocaust? Parenthetically, there's a Yid that we all know, Rabbi Mangel, Zosang Gesund, Nissen Mangel, who was asked that question. He has a number from Auschwitz on his arm. And when people would ask him, where was God during the Holocaust, he would say, with me. And I heard it from him more than once. He said, if you knew what was going on in Auschwitz, you know that not one single Jew should have survived. Not one. He talked about the death march. Thousands of Jews died and thousands of Jews survived. He says, no idea how supernatural it was. They were wearing pajamas, nothing. Sleeping on the snow in sub-zero weather. With nothing to eat except the snow itself. And they walked for weeks. He says, any single Jew who survived the Holocaust survived because God held them by the hand. And in no way is this chas v'shalom diminishing the tragedy of the Holocaust or justifying it or explaining it. But this is just a survivor who's a witness saying this is what happened. Every survivor survived because God saved him. Every single one. In any case, so this rabbi was asked, where was God during the Holocaust? And I don't know exactly what he said, but he said something to the effect that God was present during the Holocaust. In other words, between the two options of saying God was absent during the Holocaust and saying that God was there and he allowed it to happen, he gave this position that God was there and he permitted it to happen. And the community was so upset at him that he had to leave the country, Persian. So he came back to America and he wrote this to the Rebbe. And again, I hope I'm quoting him correctly, but the spirit of what he said was that he asked the Rebbe, why do people react so emotionally? This didn't happen in 1955, it happened in 1988, 40 years after the war. And the Rebbe answered something to the effect that the Jewish nation is so traumatized, is so shocked, is so exhausted from the Holocaust that any effort, any attempt to in any way, shape, or form explain anything about the Holocaust cannot be digested with any kind of reason. We're just not able, as a people, to even contemplate making sense out of this tragedy. It's too intimate, it's too personal, it's too close. So I want to say something in light of that, which is a personal opinion, a personal feeling. So many people are busy with Holocaust remembrance. It's such a big part of our lives. And we talk about never again. It's not a joke. Never again is not a joke. I mean, we're seeing today that never again is not just a rhetoric. But the Rebbe didn't talk so much about Holocaust remembrance. The Rebbe talked about rebuilding and looking forward. And it's been said that the Rebbe didn't pay enough attention to the past. To use a religious form for this, that anytime Jewish people had terrible tragedy, they would make kinnis, lamentations, right? We don't have a Yom HaShoyah, a day of mourning for every tragedy that happened to the Jewish people historically. We have one day that's dedicated to all our shoyas, and that's Tisha B'Av. On Tisha B'Av, we mourn for every tragedy that ever happened, including the Holocaust. And we say lamentations, we say prayers that remind a liturgy, paragraphs, of various distinct events of tragedy that befell the Jewish nation. Some Gedolei Yisrael wrote kinnis, the Babaveh Rebbe, the Kloisenberger Rebbe, but it's not, we don't say them. And the question is, why not? The Rebbe once spoke about it. The Rebbe spoke about Purim, Tafshin Tazayin. He gave a very interesting explanation. But I want to say a very, very simple thing. As long as one survivor is alive, as long as the Jewish nation experiences the direct trauma of the Holocaust, we can't afford to look back. We have to look forward. In other words, it's now over 70 years since the end of the war. And the Jewish nation has come incredibly far. partly because of Eretz Yisrael and partly because God loves us and we've survived and rebuilt. But as long as the Holocaust is an imminent, a personal pain, we don't experience it. We move, because the pain will paralyze us. The pain will absolutely suffocate us. I know a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, who told me that there's a new field in psychotherapy where survivors came out of the war, got married, built families, and became very successful people, and now old. And they no longer can suppress, and all the pain of the Holocaust is coming out, and it's a whole new specialty, it's a whole new subdivision within psychotherapy, because they don't have the ability to survive, which is to go on and not to look back. And I believe, this is part of the reason the Rebbe took the position he took. The Rebbe became a Rebbe and pushed forward, positive, forward. There's forever to mourn the Holocaust. There's forever to lament the Holocaust, to protest the Holocaust. Now we have to heal, we have to repair, we have to recover from the Holocaust. I'm not answering the question. I'm just sharing some thoughts. Most of them I heard from others, and some of them are my own. And I hope I didn't offend anybody, and I certainly hope I didn't say anything which is incorrect.